Dr. Anthony Fauci is our country's top infectious disease doctor.
Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Fauci.
Dr. Anthony Fauci.
The one and only Dr. Anthony Fauci.
He's been a rare source of clarity in the Trump administration's response.
Dr. Fauci is a truth teller. He's science, knowledge, evidence, data. And that's what we have to have if we're going to have a cure.
Dr. Anthony Fauci has emerged as one doctor that just about everyone in America knows, a trusted scientific expert during this pandemic. Also, a glaring contrast to a president who's fomented misinformation at this serious time. Look at the latest numbers that show 36% of Americans trust what the president says, while almost double, a full 60%, prefer to trust Fauci. Now, this doctor is not the only medical expert on the task force, nor the only veteran public servant in the picture. So it's not exactly just automatic that any doctor would stand so tall above the administration that he serves in. But Fauci has been at this a long time, appointed in 1984 to run the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, the same post he holds now. And he was accustomed to leadership roles long before that. Did you know he was captain right here of his high school basketball team? And he was the academic leader of his peers when he finished first in his class right there at Cornell Medical School. Fauci also stepped into the lead professionally when working at the NIH in the early 80s, taking on what was then a strange new disease called AIDS.
I'm working directly on AIDS, both clinically and from a basic science standpoint. What I'd like to do this evening is to review for you some of the most recent advances in AIDS, as well as provide for you a background for understanding how we got to where we are today in our understanding of AIDS.
That's old school Fauci right there. And his empirical, no-nonsense approach built trust across party lines. He was an advisor to presidents in both parties. He worked to combat virtually decades. And right now, at a time when many are asking, why weren't we more prepared? Why didn't we save lives and money investing in detection and testing earlier instead of getting hit like this and watching so many other people die? It's worth noting that part of the answer resides in how the federal government handles science, how it handles empirical information, which is something Dr. Fauci has helped to provide in many administrations. Here he was warning about SARS in 2003.
When you have a respiratory illness that can be spread from person to person, and you have something that's global, and you have jet travel, nowhere in the world is completely safe when there's an epidemic raging in one part of the world. And since that's going on in China, we need to continue to be very vigilant.
A risk in China means we have to be vigilant here. Sound familiar? And look, we went over the archive. Beyond the real-time warnings of those emerging threats, Fauci is also part of a group of experts who publicly warned about the signs that specifically a flu-like pandemic could become the big one, which is similar to what coronavirus has become. Here he was in 2005.
Right now, and we all admit that, right now, if we had an explosion of an H5N1, we would not be prepared for that.
You see this whole business with the H5N1 virus as an exercise to try and improve our capabilities of fighting off a pandemic?
Well, I don't see it as an exercise because it could be the big one. It could be. And if it is, our rushing around, doing what we need to do, pushing the envelope is not for naught or in vain.
Fauci's clarity, his honesty, and his scientific expertise continued to fortify his reputation. In fact, in any evidence-based conversation, that kind of approach made him the authority to cite, which leads me to the next thing we want to show you, how one Republican candidate cited Fauci in a presidential debate, while over the years other presidents have touted him with tributes and even ultimately the Medal of Freedom.
Tony and his team stepped up, and you were ready. Tony and I were fondly reminiscing about SARS and H1N1. That's what these guys do for fun. And we were lucky with H1N1 that it did not prove to be more deadly.
I think of Dr. Fauci. Probably never heard of him. Well, you did. Ann heard him. He's a very fine research, top doctor at National Institute of Health, working hard doing something about research on this disease of AIDS.
Those who know Tony do admit one flaw. Sometimes he forgets to stop working. He regularly puts in 80-hour weeks. And from time to time, he's even found notes on his windshield left by his co-workers that say things like, "Go home, you're making me feel guilty."
There is value in celebrating hard work in public service, and empirical honesty. Dr. Fauci has been quite consistent over the decades in his scientific approach, as well as the last thing we want to show you, his faith in the human spirit.
Hopefully, our recent advances of being able to isolate, identify, and characterize the agent, together with the advances in understanding the natural history and pathophysiology of this disease, will allow us over the next year to come back to you and tell you that we now not only have hope and hypothesis, but that we have a real prevention and indeed a real cure. Thank you.
We now have hope, and hope for a cure. Those were Dr. Fauci's words. They resonate today. They're our last words in tonight's broadcast. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.